That's not my fault. I'm sorry, what was the date, Mr. Mayor?
This was going to be December 31st, 2024, next December. And for I think the sound was still on, it just wasn't recording, but for the purpose of the recording, it would be once again, the township attorney and administration would conduct a review of municipal code, but identify obsolete, vague, over specific and missing areas that require revision. And that's one piece. The second item that I have is I didn't really have another place to put this. It could fall into administration, like the general code, is by next September 1st, 2024, the township will secure a system for electronic storage of records and publish as much as we can online. The purpose of this, of course, is to increase their transparency, but also hopefully to minimize the number of OPA requests that have to be filed with the clerk's office. If people can just get the records, that might decrease some of the labor in the clerk's office as well. But this is something that we would probably have to hire a company to assist us with because of the massive amount of records that we have. Our record storage capacity is significantly limited. We use offsite storage in addition to what's in our building. What's in our building is in a very scary basement. So it'd be nice to. So those are the two that I have that kind of fall into this area. Does anybody else have anything that would fall into?
Should we comment on these? I agree with both of them.
Okay.
My comments on that would be, I know years ago, our prior manager and our clerk went through our codes and we updated some of them and redid and cleaned them up a lot. I also think the electronic storage, we looked at pricing for that. So I think we have a record of pricing for that. Again, I think our clerk was involved with that, getting prices. And I do think that the electronic storage of it would be helped by the addition of an assistant clerk. And it would provide another person to handle all that and take care of those issues.
I mean, if I may,
Sure.
and that was the process we went through, the full recodification of ordinances where we basically revised and replaced the township code in its entirety, which is, we did pull a lot of the very obsolete sections out. I'm just, curious to develop more. Do you feel, we missed stuff or?
I think it's something we should do every few years.
Right.
Because some things don't apply anymore. There are other recommendations. We update things as we have conversations with people about how the ordinances operate. Obviously, the biggest thing we're doing is the zoning code. We can start to look at, can we make some of these more user-friendly and accessible and more readable? Is there something we can do from there?
And I would add that one big thing that we may still need to do a little bit of, we've always wanted to make sure that any fees are in a fee ordinance only and not in a section of the township code for simplicity of updates of fees to be able to do all our fees at once. That would be something I would flag that we would want to look out for. I don't know whether or not we did all that through recodification or if we still have bits and pieces of those left in the ordinances. And I'm seeing Mrs. Kiernan nodding for the second part of that, where we still have bits and pieces of that left in the ordinances. So,
Councilwoman?
No, we did. We're good.
Okay. Councilwoman?
Since Councilman Roman brought up fees, I would add an additional goal of looking at all of our fee structure. And so that we can systematically look at our fees and determine if they need to be increased. I believe it's been years for most of them. I'm not even sure in my first tenure on council if we did a lot of fee revisions. So it's been at least 4 years. But that is one of the things that I would like us to focus on. I agree with the previous comments. I'll just add about the electronic storage. I appreciate, wanting to get that project started. I think it's a very robust project. We've talked about it in the past. So it may not be able to be done on a particular timeline, but if we decide to fund it, I think it would be great to see that project completed in a reasonable period of time. I would defer to the administration how long it's going to take.
The goal I wrote was by next September to have a system.
Oh, just the system.
Just having the system moving, yes. And then as we go, we would keep adding them, but to identify a system that we can start to do things, but to find a system that works for us, that works for our staff, that works for the public. I think that's something that we need to really do on that.
My goal on fees really, I feel needs to happen, it needs to at least start in very soon, so that we can start getting some of the budget impacts on that. So it would be a process I would hope we could do within the next 6 to 9 months where we systematically review all of our fees, especially if they haven't been touched in years. To see if it would be appropriate to change them. Some may go up, some may go down.
Any thoughts on the fees? Go ahead, Council.
Yes, so in terms of general code and ordinances, I had identified reviewing the fee ordinances and doing assessments. And I thought that that would be more of an iterative process because there are certain fees that we would have to be evaluating even before the end of this year, not including but not limited to the pool fee ordinance and others. So these are things that need to be done this winter. So I would say even starting within the first 3 months, and then you do another batch in another 3 months. So a 6-month goal, 30, 60, or sorry, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months kind of goal to get through it. So then, essentially by this time next year, we would have updated all of our fees and then we can begin that process again as appropriate.
So we would look for a timeline on that, or let's say the first batch by December 1st and the second by February 1st.
I'm willing to say by the end of the year, like not by December 1st, but like, I do think that revenue generation is a really important, I guess, general code update that we need to be looking at least based on how you've broken down this agenda, because you broke out different things that would have also been included in the code.
Yeah.
So that was what I identified. With regard to what you had advanced, if it's just about identifying a system by this time or September of next year, that makes sense. But with regard to the full comprehensive review, I share some of the other council members' concerns or statements that this process has been done before. And I mean, there's always going to be revisions to legislation. So I just think doing the broad comprehensive review might be something that I would recommend that we provide like lower on the priority list. There's just a lot of items that we'll be identifying as priorities as this evening goes on.
I understand that. So I think the way that we have three, does anybody else have any proposals related to the general code and ordinance? The way that we should do this is so I'm trying to track these, right? So we'll start with the last one. And I think the way I'll just do this is list out what we have, and if anybody objects, we'll change it rather than raising hands or whatever, if that's okay. So general code and ordinances, examine our fee structure. I would definitely like, as part of this, see comparables, right? Where do we stand with other fees? So the first batch would be by 12/31/23, and then we'd look at another one by like March 30th, right? I'll just make another, and that would bring us into the budget time. Going to Councilwoman McGrath's point, and that would be, I'm calling that an A priority. That's the first band. That's just what I'm putting in Excel. Okay, so on that one, I think is the other proposal was the online storage system, the electronic storage system. Is everybody okay with by September 1st securing the system? Is that everybody okay with that? I mean, we're in agreement that that's something that we should really have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think if I may, we're gonna wanna do a lot of things, so at the end of the day, it will come down to money, but I think in concept, we wanna.
Yes, so we have to have further discussions once we have it all, but
Yeah.
we really want to say, do we want to move this along? Because something we're just not interested in moving along, there's no point talking about it right anymore. So we definitely have that in there. And the last one, on reviewing the ordinances, I'm happy pushing that back another, if we have done it recently. I like to keep reviewing things, but I think it's also something we can do on an ad hoc basis as well, and keep up on that. So I had that in band B anyway, so I'll just leave it in band B and then put the date out a little further on that band. Let me make that. Just apologize to the audience. Just gonna keep track of this stuff, and then one spreadsheet. All right. Right. So that's our general code and ordinances. Let's move on to boards and commissions. So my calling is maybe they don't have anything related to boards and commissions. Jack, do you have anything?
My only comment when I looked at that was, what we need to do, and I think we have been implementing this already, is trying to put out there that we need volunteers for some of these boards and commissions. So maybe we should just have a review, since we have a public information officer, on a policy or some way to put it out there every so often, just so we get new members from these boards. But other than that, it's good.
One thing I suggested in the community engagement piece that would fit into this a little bit is asking our PIO in March to have the sponsor. We have a lot of fall events and things like that. Spring's a little lighter on some of our overall things. To take a look at having a day of recruitment day for our boards and committees and for local nonprofits, where we could have it at the community center or in the civic center or whatever, and we could have our chairs and our representatives from our committees talk to people what the committees actually do, and then local nonprofits could look to, and our emergency services and groups like that, everybody from the Lions Club, the Junior Women's Club, to our boards and commissions could have a table and recruit members and talk to people. Because generally the people that you're going to find that are interested may not know that some of these things exist. I think it's a bench, so I could leave that for the community engagement piece, unless people want to talk about it now, as an idea as well. Okay, Council.
Well, several years ago, the township did host one. I'm sure you were there. I was there way before my time on council, and I think it's great to bring that back. I don't think it has to be necessarily every year, but I think it would be great to do it. So I'm in agreement. On boards and committees, what I wrote down was just that I would really like our volunteer boards and committees this fall to commit to kind of an annual goal of what they're going to analyze or do, something specific. I think for some teams or committees, it's already obvious what they're working on, but others may need, to kind of put something out there, and that they have a plan to come to the council, so that they do that thinking now before the budget process starts, so that can be worked into the budgeting process. So, or at least we understand when they may be coming with a recommendation.
I tend to agree with that as well. The other piece that I had thrown in here, I think we've spoken about this before, is having a procedure by which all these boards and commissions make recommendations. Some send us letters, some come to the council, some go to the manager. It's very different in how we do that. So the goal that I added, and I agree with Councilwoman McGrath's piece on the goal setting, is that we would have by next March or that time, the administration council would develop a common policy action recommendation procedure from boards and committees. So if boards are asking for resources or asking for programs, we have a established way that we do that. Go ahead, Councilwoman.
So for boards and committees, my understanding is that many members, including new members, are unaware of their obligations under the Open Public Meetings Act, and are maybe unfamiliar with the Open Public Records Act, and the implications of if they use personal emails. My understanding as well is that under our policies, that board members are subject to the code of conduct that all of us are, as both volunteers and employees of the Township of Verona. So I do think that it's important for there to be training established for volunteers, so that they understand both their legal obligations as volunteers, but also the rules of decorum and the code of conduct, so that we don't have any incidences on boards. So I had identified loosely that I thought that it would be appropriate to have a plan to do that by the end of the year, and I would like to see that training completed. No later than next spring.
Yes, Councilman Norman. We desperately need AV systems for this, to go boards and commissions or resident engagement. Anything that happens in the community center, public participation is in person only in the chambers. If someone is presenting something, the public can't see what's being presented and the board can barely see it. The problem is that when we went to an AV integrator, the capital cost of this was astonishingly high. So there's just simply, there has to be a better way of doing this at a much lower price. But we've had resident complaints about that they can't hear us in this meeting. This was a hack that we did at the beginning of COVID. We just need to, we need to get this done. We just can't pay full freight for it.
I agree. That's one I had in communications as well.
Yes.
And I think it would be really helpful if we have like a communications engineer that could provide consulting to us on this. And I was gonna see, do we have anybody, Councilman Roman? Councilman Roman has agreed to help consult on these projects.
So on the committee.
I think I agree with you 100%. People are having a difficult time hearing us. And there are ways of doing it that don't cost an incredible amount of money. And I think looking at that, balancing that out. The other piece of it is technology is different in every room.
Right.
And that's another component that has been, if you're meeting in the ballroom at the community center, that's one piece. If you're meeting in the conference room, that's another. If you're meeting just on Zoom, that's another. Even I discovered doing an emergency management meeting that we didn't have paid Zoom accounts. So we couldn't have meetings longer than 37 minutes or something. So even something like that would certainly be an easy thing to do. So as council members, we weren't allowed to have meetings more than 40 minutes. But
So volunteer to
yes. Does anybody disagree with moving on that as a conversation?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
does it make sense to identify different things as capital and different things as like separate categories? Because I would consider the AV upgrades to be really capital improvements.
As part of the agenda, most of the stuff that we've hit on is some doesn't have a cost necessarily, but yes, this is I would agree that that's a capital expense as well. What would be your timeline on that, Sharon?
I mean, by the end of the year, we could come up with a plan certainly and get it into the 2024 capital budget.
All right. Going to Councilwoman Holland's point on the training for boards and commission members, I've actually written in my notes as well that we should have a manual. So kind of on the same idea that includes all the information on Oprah, email accounts, how to use the video conferencing platforms that everybody gets when they sign on. And that will include the applicable policies and the code of conduct, and trying to do something there. I think the training piece is a good point. I guess my concern with that is there a way that we could do that people could do on their own schedule, right? So I wouldn't want to say, okay, we're gonna have a training once every 2 months and then we can onboard people as easily. But if we had some kind of platform where they could read the manual and then take some questions or something along those lines, like a video, Mrs. Kiernan could be the star of our Oprah video, right? And Councilman Roman could talk about whatever, but we could kind of make it interesting or something. But I want to have something where the board and committee members are informed, but the training wouldn't necessarily disincentivize them from wanting to volunteer. But at the same point, almost everywhere you go, Boy Scouts of America, the Girl Scouts, you have mandatory training to do that. If you join almost any organization, there's some kind of onboarding process. So as long as it's within the time limits where people can do it on their own time and it's a reasonable amount of time, I tend to agree with that as well.
People do it, you definitely do.
So we'll,
Just a note on that, I do know, like there's certain board, planning board, zoning board, they are required to take a class before they. Become.
so
If I may, I'm sorry.
I
No,
saw,
let her.
yes, thank you, you're so kind.
If we are going to do it where you study on your own time, I would just like to have some kind of certification process. So you would have to say that you completed this training by X date. So that it doesn't become something where they just never do the training, because odds are if we record a video and it's either, it's on some sort of platform that's affordable and reasonable to us and not just necessarily like out in the universe, then we may not have the ability to track like who has actually watched it. So we would just want to make sure that they are representing affirmatively that they did complete that training, so that then later on, if there are Oprah or code of conduct issues or, OPMA issues, then at least, you have that certification that they were aware.
This is Kieran, when people join, does everybody get sworn in when you join a board and commission, or only certain? planning
Only
boards?
get land use boards,
Only land use boards and.
yeah, but we're all thinking along the same line, yeah, because Joe and I have started this
Okay.
process, it's just a matter of getting.
Just make sure we're all, because if they came to you before they could sit for a meeting and signed a certification or whatever, that would be.
If I may, this sounds like a bit of an educational program that, could use an expert in that instructional development to, work on.
I'm sure there are better experts than me in adult education. But yeah, no, I think something we can do, and there are ways of doing it so it's not horrible, and that you actually learn some things that can be interactive as you go, and they're not expensive. Okay, let's, the other kind of piece I had on the board and commission piece, is by the end of next year, so December 31st, 2024, I kind of tied this in with the code revision. Is let's look at our code and see if the boards and commissions are doing what the code says. If they're doing more, do we need to revise the code? And if we have a change in remit, let's look, and we need to, I think, have a conversation, some of our about what we as a council are looking for, and the town is looking for from our boards and commissions. And we had a really good discussion on the MIAAC ordinance, because we got to write it from scratch, and that was there. But I think there's some areas that boards and commissions do more of one piece, and we need to see if that's something that we just want to leave them doing one piece, or are we looking to do more, or is it too much for one board and commission? So I would throw that in there. But once again, that doesn't cost us anything other than advertising the ordinances, to take a look at those as well, if nobody has an objection. All right, moving on to land use. We also want to start on land use, Councilman Roman.
And there are a couple of, first off, the big one is obviously preserving more open space. And this one, we can come up with a measure, I said, well, it would be nice to preserve 5 more acres of open space, or we could pick any number and have a metric on it. Obviously the open space levy is exhausted. So we've got some challenges there with budgeting. And then the other thing on land use, ultimately, do we want to lump some of the discussions we've already had about land use and our zoning ordinance into a goal? Or is that just simply a process that we've already embarked down? And, do we want to measure ourselves by when we complete, revisions to the zoning ordinance? Or is that a process that we know we're going to do regardless?
I put the zoning ordinance piece in as a goal. That's what, I think the way I envision this is where we can package this and publish it to the public as what we're doing, right? And make it very clear, this is what we're targeting on these dates, and advise that the dates are have to be flexible based on how government works, they're based on expenses and we need to get reports back and stuff like that, but we have targets. But I think absolutely, we need to hear when we hire the planner, what their piece is. But the goal I had set forth was we'll have a draft to send to the planning board for the consistency review by X date. But I put one in as a placeholder. The reality, we can't know what that date is gonna be until we hear from our expert and what their timeline is once we hire. Go ahead.
That may be true, but in my view, kind of implementing the master plan, especially as it comes to zoning for the Bloomfield Avenue and maybe even Compton corridor, really is our top priority. It's like, it's thing number one. We really need to get moving to help generate some great projects. They'll generate revenue to defend against affordable housing, to satisfy the public and the business community's need for change. So I would love to see that rezoning of Bloomfield Avenue specifically, whatever strategy we end up taking, which I thought we had a great conversation on Friday. And the public can watch it, with some ideas already right off the bat, but I think that should be like, can we get that done by next June? And I think we should not let the planners determine the timeline. I think we should. And then I had in conjunction with that, things like looking at the zoning for the RR zone.
Yeah.
Some other key zones that we've talked about a lot, that are either problematic or represent opportunity. And to see if we can get those done in short order after we focus on downtown. And any other easy changes to the master plan that can run parallel to a more complex analysis on what we need to do about Bloomfield. I mean, that would be my take, and that is one of the main, like, I have not a lot of things written on this paper, but it's all focused on that.
If
A lot of it.
if I get off Councilmember, I like the idea of actually, as we hire the planner, to give them goal dates for, there are certain things that we know we're going to do in certain areas that we know we're going to revise. It's just not, there's not a question mark as to if we are or aren't. So I would say that we actually need to give them
Fine with that.
a task.
Yeah.
And calendar it.
So what,
Uh,
do you agree with Councilwoman McGrath's point that we should do this in steps as far as Bloomfield Avenue and the RR zones, or are we looking to have one
Omnibus
one omnibus presentation that we can send? My only thought of doing it in piecemeal is that we're sending it then in piecemeal to the planning board to get that.
But I think it's complex. I think that each one of these zones is complex enough in its needs that it's going to require, there's no way that the planning board will be able to discuss, I mean, take more than one meeting per zone for the planning board. So I think that if we don't break it up, I think it's going to be a very long time. I think it'll be, fall before we're even ready to assemble something. I'd rather, we know we've got proposed redevelopments on some sites. We know, I would do it. I would just pick the things we know we're going to do and just do them as a unit each.
Okay. So that's something that I have no problem doing it that way. I mean, you've been on the planning board for longer than I have, which is a month and a half. So I'll take your suggestion certainly as valid. But that's something I think that then it's a lot easier, I think, to set the timelines then for the planners, is if we're giving more specific discrete tasks for that purpose. Councilwoman Hall?
I'm inclined to agree as well, because I do think that if we focus on the larger picture, then yes, this will be time consuming and it'll be an instance where it may never even get started. And that'll be to the detriment of things like Bloomfield Avenue. I share Councilwoman McGrath's concern that I think that it is a big priority for us to focus on our downtown, and I think we should look to both Bloomfield, or the length of Bloomfield, not just that town center, but the length of Bloomfield, as well as the Compton corridor, as great opportunities for increasing ratables, which will take some of the pressure off of our residents in terms of tax increases as time goes on. And the reality is everything costs more money.
Yes.
And I had Bloomfield under economic development anyway.
Yeah, me too. I think that's something that
Yeah.
we all agree on. Councilwoman McGrath, you were looking at the target date for the Bloomfield Compton as you said June. I originally kind of envisioned March. I as that's the date I had. In here, is that, do we want to push to try and get something done by March, or do we think that if they're gonna need till June, Mr. Fiarco's probably.
It depends on when we contract the planner.
There you go.
Yeah.
I need to contract the planner and then budget, we can set the table.
So,
It's part of the contractual negotiation with the planner. I think if we give them a date that they can't hit,
Yeah.
that doesn't help anyone. But I think that getting those dates into the contract is key.
And let's be clear, if I may, I don't think it's so much gonna be the planner, I think it's gonna be more about getting it through the public approval process and getting feedback, especially when we talk about parking requirements. And it's interesting that we were talking about, is this land use or economic development? I think we start with land use, and then there's a follow-up project when we get the zoning right on the economic development piece and whether or not, and I know we're gonna talk about it later, but like, you know, do we have a special improvement district and blah, 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 like, that comes later. We gotta fix the zoning first to unlock some of these opportunities. I do wanna circle back though to Councilman Roman's comment on open space. I mean, listen, we all wanna preserve open space. I actually am surprised by that goal. I feel like we haven't swallowed financially our previous open space purchase, so I'm a little hesitant to agree to that as a goal until we see what the voters decide in November. And I think it's a great idea, but I really feel like our focus, especially when it comes to affordable housing too, is making sure our zoning is really tight before 2025.
I had actually specifically put it as a 24 to 25 goal, like, because I know that realistically, there's step A before step B comes in. But if we're looking in the out years, which we can do in this, I do think that continued acquisition of open space should be on the table. And you may not, you may not hit 5 acres. You might preserve 1.5 acres, 2 acres, better than nothing. But as long as we say, okay, well, we want to look and see how much, open space we can preserve.
there isn't much left to preserve, which is the challenge, and
Right.
anyways.
Right. There are still key parcels that would be nice to preserve.
The I added on with the Councilwoman McGrath brought up the November ballot. I put a goal on here that is the quickest goal, which by September 30th, we need to have some kind of educational marketing plan for the ballot question.
We're already in the public information officer, it's already on draft 2 being reviewed.
Excellent.
Brian and myself. We're editing it, we'll be up to draft 3 and be done shortly to get to you. So that the council can review it and I get a green light more. It's been.
So we agree that that's goal, right?
It's absolutely.
Look, we all agree on.
It's absolutely.
Come out.
Yeah, we have it. Yeah, so, it's one of these things that, let me say, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, speaking to the zoning ordinance, when we look at it overall, we talk about the town center, we talk about the extended town center and the Pompton Avenue district. Those are the 3 that I personally feel are gonna be the focus. I wish we had more time with the planners and we had another question we could got in there, and one of them would have been, give us your timeline. Like, when do you think it's easier for them to do the entire zoning ordinance all at once and take an extra 2 or 3 weeks? And then present it to us, and maybe they can present it with those first 3 districts, and then we can decide on that, send them to the planning board. I think if we start breaking it up in too many pieces, I think then conversations just keep going. If you talk about the town, you can't just do the town center and then send it, because there's ripple effects in the extended town center and then further on up into the Pompton Avenue zone. So I think what we should do is decide on the planner and then bring that planner in, maybe in closed session, and have a discussion with them, and him or her, and decide, give us your ideas, your presentation on your timeline and what you think you can and cannot do. Or do we bring them all in again for a 15-minute? No, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But let's decide, and then I think obviously the zoning ordinance is overdue, the changes are overdue. I really think we need to get on this. I think that would be, we took a big step, interview the planners, let's hire them, and then go forward after that.
And on that note, is everybody comfortable with having the discussion on the planners at the September 11th meeting? And then determining a planner at that point, or do you think that we would have a discussion, then you would want one more meeting to make that decision?
I would say that basically if we want to have any of them make alterations to their proposals, there's another, there has to be some back and forth. We can't like say, oh, so and so is our favorite planner, but only if. That's structurally, we would need to decide how to do that first, how to contract them, how to come to an agreement with them. If maybe there's a planner that we like them in concept, but they're not able to do the things that we need on the timeline that we need them to do.
So should we reach out to each of them and ask?
I mean, if that's something we could do, in writing,
We can do anything you would like.
let's do it. I mean, if nobody
I
has
think that's your
objection,
timeline, this is what we need to do.
how do you propose the project would be done, right? I mean, and ask them what timeline. And that would be an interesting question, because what we may get is planners that are more willing to commit to a more expeditious timeline as part of the proposal, that in order to attract in business. So that's another piece of this as well, if that's a question that we're asking in a competitive process.
Wouldn't mind that as a follow-up to them.
Then I think that's fair. And get that.
Just to be clear on what you want, it's the Bloomfield Avenue and Fountain area or the entire master plan.
I mean, ask how they would do it. I think the best question is,
Our focus is really on town center, expanded town center and Hoppin Avenue.
We've got to touch,
But
we have to do everything.
would it be better? Would it be better for them to do the entire ordinance once to us or?
And what is their?
And or, if I may, or again, running two parallel tracks. So that is a possibility, is that we're doing a big conversation about what to do about Bloomfield Avenue, which, one of the firms, came in with like an idea, which, we're not gonna talk about tonight, but and then still running a parallel track where we're making a lot of the zoning changes, an ordinance on all those zoning changes that we need to on the code, because one idea was like sort of like an overlay.
Yes.
So, anyway, regardless, I think it would be interesting to hear from them as a follow-up.
if I might suggest the way that you structure a question, the town council has considered multiple approaches to accomplishing the zoning ordinance. One would be to consider all of the planning needs of the town all at once and pass a single ordinance. Another would be to target key zones of the town that we know need to be addressed. Please discuss both approaches, indicate your preference and give timelines for both. That way each planner could tell you basically, if you want me to do this all at once, maybe it takes me less time overall. And I can do it earlier, or if you want me to really focus on these couple of zones first and then get to the rest of it, here's what that looks like. I mean, just to give them a little bit more of a seed for discussion would be how I structure.
We also have the other things on land use. Okay. Utilities. Councilwoman Holland, if you would like to start this conversation, that would be appropriate, I'm sure.
I ran on a platform of utilities 2 years ago, and I want to acknowledge that in that time, the administration has undertaken a lot of active effort in improving that situation. So I would identify continued work on remediating our wetlands as a top priority and completing that task in the timeline that's feasible, as based on the reporting that we regularly get from Jacobs Engineering. I would identify the capital improvements necessary for the sewer utility and make those improvements as well. I know that we're undergoing a study to do that. I want a full evaluation of the pool operation as a utility, because it is also a utility. And I do think it's important to complete the rate study. I understand that we are helpful for us identifying the rate structure that we have currently, opportunities for improvement so that we can maximize our revenue from these utilities. And most of this is already underway. I would also like for us to continue to maintain our asset management plan so that we can identify the level of service that we wish to provide to our customers and maintain that by having regular and routine maintenance on our systems so that we don't find ourselves in this position again in the future. I do want to just point out that I think that this is so consuming from both an operations and capital standpoint that it becomes, in my opinion, the number one priority. I know that it has been. And so it does swallow, or it takes up a lot of room that Others may want to fill with other priorities, but I will say that I think this is possibly the largest the largest priority and remains that way. So it was top of my list. And, most of this is ongoing, and I think that the timelines are already established, so I didn't go into the detail of combing through all of our prior reports and whatnot to establish those, but I do believe that the administration is well aware of them.
I identified similar priorities. Mr. Diarco, do you have a timeline? I know we do get the Jacobs reports, and we do have permitting filed for the Lynn Drive well project. Do we have any idea when we might hear back?
As soon as the DEP approves the designs and plans and for the wind, and that's imminent. So we'll be going out to bid maybe by the end of the year.
That's right.
Yeah, the Fairview well, we're still clearing issues with Green Acres. And as soon as we clear those issues, those designs are completed. And the applications will be down at DEP and it's dependent on DEP. Sewer utility, the plant, that study's underway, and we should be getting the results of that in 2024 on the plan or options, and that would probably be by June of 2024. So far, that's very tentative, but that's what it's looking. The pool utility operation, that's an ongoing study. We'll be doing that in conjunction with the budget, because that's capital item. The rate study is, I met with the firm selected. They'll be giving me their timelines. That's just happened in the selection of the firm. And I'll have those timelines to you. I don't see that not being completed in the early part of 2024. Let's say before June at least. And taking care of my money. Don't see me, don't.
That's fine. The Zoom still has you.
Oh, darn. I'll look into the schedule and ask management.
It's helpful if you can get back on those, because if we're going to publish this out as a document, I would like to have these timelines available. Because people ask, what is going on, how is this progressing? It'd be a good idea to have those out. I had some rough dates in my SMART goal. I'm happy if you have more information on that. I'll obviously update the dates, but if we need to push vendors to get this stuff done sooner, that's something we need to start doing. Some of these things don't take as long as we're told they take, but we have to start, I think, pushing a little bit to get some of these studies back, and because we have to take action based on, and sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the grease from our vendors. Deputy Mayor?
Yes, I would say I 100% agree with Council Holland. The two wells I had as my number one, it's costing us a lot of money to have them offline. I wish, I do thank Mr. Diarco for your updates. They're very welcomed and good to see. I wish there was some way, obviously, if we can keep the pressure on and get this, running a little faster, it'd be nice, but obviously there's supply chain issues still. As far as one I wanted to add is we did the potable water system plan, and seeing what's been going on and how important it is to us. We had that report done in 2021. Just maybe a follow-up on all the recommendations in that report. If we've I know one was in there, and this is going to cost us a lot of money, but there was one just for the Pompton Avenue, one line on Pompton Avenue. It was like 455 lineal feet, was $160,000 to replace. It was one of the oldest they located. There's in the report, there were some X amount of lineal feet of lines, 850, I think, that were unidentified. So they didn't know whether they were lead or not. But as far as we know, all the other lines that we've located are not lead. So we don't think there's any lead. But I think maybe we can go back to this report and go through and see. I know there's some things on there that have been crossed off and taken care of, but identify those lines and maybe work on that report that we have.
That's kind of a response to Deputy Mayor's point. What I was really looking for when we got that report was essentially a staff response on it. I would like our staff to interpret that report and, in the context of what's achievable when. Our own existing maintenance practices, there may have been things that were already on the calendar. I'd like that turned into Verona's action plan, really.
So,
I believe we're all speaking about the asset management plan.
Right.
So just for the manager's clarity, this is the asset management plan and it's the actions that have been taken to maintain the level of service as well as to improve that. So and I believe we did at the time get report outs from the department heads about the work that was being done. But I agree that it should be regularly maintained. And in fact, we have a legal obligation to be maintaining the asset management.
any other, yes, Councilwoman.
The other thing I want to add to all of this is I agree with everything that was said, and it's the utilities are a lot. And so I think when we really we're completing an analysis phase, but then we really have to decide as a community if we want to continue managing these utilities as they are now or move to a different model. The most extreme of which is, of course, selling the utilities, but there are many gradations in between. And I went to a training on this on the league. It was very fascinating, and they offer it, I'm sure, every year. So that's more of a 2025 goal of like taking a step back and saying, is this what we want to be doing as a municipality? And is there a different model for us as a community? But we have to do all these other things that we've laid out. Not talking about the pool utility, just talking about water sewer.
Yeah.
We're in the pool business. But so I think that strategic kind of step back needs to happen after a period of time, but I can't see that period of time being anything less than a year and a half, because we have a lot to do.
Okay, I'll put that in the C band.
Yeah.
Yes, that was fun.
That was actually kind of in the back of my head when I was thinking about the wastewater treatment plant. I think that basically once we get the wastewater treatment plant report, we're going to know a lot more, and that's going to drive that decision making. And, I was thinking about this as a goal of, going into major capital improvements at the wastewater treatment plant. But I think that that's one of those things where, you stop before you enter that sort of program and make a decision, because you have to make a large decision one way or the other. So I think that kind of, I agree that should be done, but that's going to be the timeline driver really, is once we know what we need.
Yeah.
And then we can talk in terms of the long-term, when I look at the operating expense, I look at the cost to the residents, what is the most economically efficient for the public here within the context of the size community we are, our capabilities and our, funding resources. But yeah, we need to answer that question. But if we answer that question, yes, we do want to stay in the utility business, that comes to a follow-up process of, okay, we know that we need to start working on the wastewater treatment.
And spending spending a lot of money.
Right, and so that's the second phase of planning after that of, yes, we are going to have to implement an upgrade program for the WWTP if we choose to stay in that business.
Councilwoman.
I would just add that it's more than just capital improvements. If we want to stay in that business, we are going to have to continue to hire staff.
Yes.
Because right now we have only a few key personnel that run our utilities. This is a large operation, and we would likely see it's only becoming more complex with more reporting requirements and more regulatory requirements. So I think part of the evaluation would be making sure that we are adequately staffed, because it's unfair to expect one person to run the entire thing.
And sourcing qualified labor in that business is challenging.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The other utility piece. Okay. We are moving right along. Non-utility infrastructure, a lot of the non-utility infrastructure I had kind of shown to recreation. So I'll save it for them. Does anybody have any specific non-utility? Councilman.
I would say definitely the flood mitigation project on the Peckman River. That we need to not lose momentum on that one. And that should be that that's a public expectation. So we need to kind of be back being able to report on progress on that one. Just consider that thing we need to keep moving forward on how we want to turn that into a specific goal. I kind of leave to the group.
Councilman.
I actually this is one of my top goals. If we're talking about flooding, I didn't know if it was public safety, it was infrastructure, but I'm happy to
Put in public safety, but infrastructure, if it's fine.
We're approaching the 2-year anniversary of Ida. I think that we need to have I would like to see in the next 3 months a plan from the administration on all of the steps that we need to take, or that we've already identified that we could take to help mitigate flooding. This includes a plan to access federal funding, the implementation of the joint board with Verona Cedar Grove, a stormwater analysis, how we are supporting residents to apply for blue acres, resident and town responsibilities to clean out things like culverts and drains. They're just, we talked about a lot of things and then the implementation kind of petered out, and it's inevitable that we'll have another event at some point and we owe the residents more. So I would like a firm plan. I would like a project plan from the administration so that we can understand what pieces are moving, what do we need to do to move stalled pieces, and we may need to advocate to federal officials. So like, what do we need to do to move forward?
So say December 1st, so 3 months, just for the plan, the plan.
Yeah, or the end of the year, I think, you know, we have some hiring vacancies, so I want to give a little grace there. But yeah, we need to start next year, because also I want to understand then the line of sight on the funding. We're doing some projects right now on bank stabilization, so it's been a few things, but comprehensively, I think we're a little stalled.
Tend to agree. Well, this is something that we had a lot of conversations after it happened. And water has been a theme of this council, whether it's cleaning it or having too much of it. But it's something that I think we, the PFOA project has, as far as infrastructure and utilities, has, it's so significant. I agree, we need to absolutely do the flood plan piece. And the emergency management office has published a report on some of the pieces of it. I was one of the authors of that report, but it did discuss some of the things that we do in the event of one of these things. So we could look at that as well, perhaps ask Smart to share that with the council. It's not in that document. The having the governing body aware of those things, right? Yes.
And if I may add another piece, we've asked before for an analysis of all of the roads in the township, so that we could understand what roads need strategic fixing and when, so that we can sufficiently capital plan for them and maybe make some stronger decisions when it comes to grant file.
I put that in my public works piece. We would have a 5 to 10 year paid in the construction plan. For that, what are we going to do over the next? Yeah, we don't have to, just to have an idea, not do it in 5 years, have a plan for what we're going to do. So right now it's, I think we're aware of what we need to do, but it would be helpful to have that timeline, because there's a big capital piece of it and there's grant funding that relates to this. It would be good to have that in as well, to know what roads we're working on and when. And it also gives the public the opportunity to advocate for their street and understand maybe why their street isn't happening next year versus 3 years. And it's becoming, as we're doing these very nice road projects, more people are getting interested in having the roads fixed.
And
Yes.
one more. So if we wanted to do like an energy plan, would that be under this category?
Sure.
Okay, so that was another, again, I only wrote down a few things, but completing the energy audit that Steve Neal was supposed to start for us, and I don't know if it got started. But like really completing an energy audit and a strategic point of view on how we're gonna move towards electrification, you know, EV and other things, I think is really necessary. I think we're spending a lot of money at PSE&G. What is it like? Councilwoman
It's a
Holland.
lot.
It's like $500 million.
Just for the wastewater treatment plant alone.
Yeah. So I would say an energy audit and then subsequent plan, really, it would be really great to get that done as well in the next 9 months.
I can respond, you know, the wastewater treatment, the wastewater treatment plant was specifically excluded from the last energy audit. Because it was an industrial facility and that only focused on light commercial, so we've never had an energy audit of the wastewater treatment plant that I'm aware of, and we know for a fact that's, one of the places where we can actually save money.
Councilwoman?
Thanks for recognizing me. I will say that, some of the points that were made, I had under different categories as well. So I will say that I agree with Councilwoman McGrath in particular about the joint flood control board. I did have that under intergovernmental relations or shared services because that is something that we had intended to move forward with Cedar Grove with, and that seems to have stalled out. And I would very much like to be involved in that. So I very much view that as a priority. With regard to community energy audits, one of the things, and I had this under public works, other than utilities, because it's really more about our facilities. But I would actually argue that what we need is actually a community energy plan. And it's not necessarily as narrow as an audit, which is typically focused on energy efficiency measures that you can do in your buildings. There are opportunities for community solar or for remote net metering that we could actually mitigate a lot of the expenses that we have going to PSE&G. And so that would be a much larger undertaking. So that is something that I do think would be very worthwhile. I know that we have boards and committees that are interested in engaging in that process as well. And I suspect there's sustainable Jersey credits that can be associated with that. There had previously been funding for community energy planning. I'm not sure if that's still available from the state for a township of Verona's size, but there are examples of other communities doing community energy plans. And yes, that would be a substantial savings for our community. And then if it's both designed in a way where we're mitigating our current, costs associated with energy consumption, but also forward looking. It could also be an economic development driver as well. So that was something that I also flagged. So for consideration. I think a community energy plan, you would need at least a year to develop. Okay. So I had that more for like an end of 24. But if we can get it done by summer, that would be great. But it's just it really comes down to when we can get it started and considering all of our other priorities. I did that. I had that lower on my list, but it's still important to me because I think that it is helpful in terms of our budget. And when we think about the economics of some of the our big wants, I think I ended up bumping up some things that might have been lower tier if I thought that they had a positive budget element, and I thought the community energy plan might.
Does this have any overlap or is this completely separate from what Sustainable Essex Alliance was doing with community energy aggregation? I know that fell by the wayside because nobody was willing to bid at a lower rate than PSE&G, but when that whole program went away, residents kind of missed the savings on their energy bills. Is that
So that's the commodity,
right?
That is so what. Since 1999, we've all been able to shop for our electrons, the commodity. And so all of the Sustainable Essex Alliance was doing the shopping for us. And it's just if you think about the benefit of collective bargaining agreements, it's just strength in numbers. And so that's what they were doing. And then the market just wasn't there to get a better price than what you got directly from PSE&G. What we still pay for, regardless of whether or not we shop for our commodity, is for the service.
Right.
So you're paying for your transmission and distribution. When you do something like net metering, net metering actually covers the transportation as well as the commodity. So you're not paying anything, then you are literally netting out your entire bill. So I would say that it is distinct, and a community energy plan is far broader. What you're talking about was just we were all shopping together.
Right.
And this is actually planning more broadly for how we're making energy savings as well as environmental benefits for our community and the economic benefits that can be concomitant with that.
Right. The reason I asked is basically just to to oversimplify, is that program sort of dead, or do we want to try and reestablish it? Is there anything there, or is this something, should we just say the Sustainable Essex Alliance aggregation program is something we aren't even going to go out to bid on ever again? Or is that something we would?
I think there could absolutely still be value to that.
Okay,
So
I still-
I have not done that, like, so we had consultant that
Right.
all of the townships were using.
Right.
I have not done that research myself,
Right.
but certainly there's likely to be benefits in the future to shopping for the commodity.
Right.
And that may be a near-term goal, like, right? So just like we spoke about zoning, there may be iterative steps that we do before we do like a comprehensive overhaul. So there might be piecemeal things that we can do to be realizing energy savings, both for our residents, but I was actually looking more to the township, which, you know, has a tax benefit to the residents.
Right.
Whereas that shopping was on your actual energy bill.
right, I mean, I kind of, this is one of those things where I'd love to be able to do both, I just feel like for the residents, I mean, a lot of people is at $20 a month back in their pocket. And that's significant to a lot of, you know, so if that program could, if we could give that program one more try, that would, you know, I would.
I was, we left that program.
We never got,
just-
we never got a bid.
Yeah, and so as a
Yeah, it was-
result, you went back to the default.
Right, it's just that we lost the rep from our own operation to that, I just wanna make, you know, see if we can sort of reestablish that. Yeah, so that's,
Council.
Yes, I think that's a good question, follow-up for the administration on transition. So Steve was our rep for the energy program with the other municipalities, so who are they? Did someone else from that group take the lead? I always got the impression Steve was a bit in the lead on that, so.
Yeah.
Good follow-up.
Yeah, Deep's on the meeting, because you just want to.
It was someone from
Caution.
Maple, it was someone from Maple. Maple, we could be still on the spot, it was someone from Maple that was lead on.
well, we have to have public participation later in the
Okay.
meeting, so.
We can reach out to Steve and find out.
As soon as I said it, Steve's gonna drop off the meeting.
Working to see how we're doing.
They will be looking at it again in the spring.
Oh, okay, oh, that's, so
There you go.
there he goes, the answer came in, so I just want to agree, thank you, Councilwoman Holland, for, you know, getting the language precise, she is the expert in this area. I really love the idea of framing it as an economic development opportunity. I think it's one of those projects, like, when we get it done, we can start passing along tax savings to the residents and create some more room in our budget, and so it's one of those projects, like, we shouldn't kick this too far down the road, because then we're just delaying saving money. And it's a lot of money.
I agree. Anything else for non-utility infrastructure? And moving on to recreation and community services. Anybody like to start this conversation?
Sure.
Got a couple.
So having served on the Recreation Advisory Committee for the last 2 years and continuing that service, I would say that in terms of capital improvements. And so again, if I was ranking my top priorities in terms of capital improvements and operations, I would have ranked utilities #1 and I put recreation #2. I think we have a lot of recreation facilities in this township. Some of them old, and I believe that we are doing a field usage study. I think that's important to understand. And then the next step to that is identifying where we need to make strategic investments to improve the recreation experience. So improving those facilities to improve that recreation experience. So 2 key points are Everett Field, which has been discussed at length. There's a lot of improvements to be made there. There's a lot of decisions to be made there about the field usage as well. Another is returfing Centennial Field, which I believe is past its useful life. So we're on borrowed time, and that will be a large expense. And there's a lot of programs that use that field. There are some programs that can only use that field because it would be the only field that is actually lined for their sport. So these are things to consider as key areas of capital improvements and the like. I think it's also important for us to look at community services and recreation programming. So I think the rec committee has been working through timing and calendars, the programming itself. So doing kind of like a comprehensive review, but I do think that a lot of that needs to be driven by the rec committee. So I liked one of the comments made in terms of boards and commissions about establishing goals for maybe boards and commissions. The Recreation Advisory Committee actually has 14, I believe, duties and obligations, but including among them are recommendations for programming and enhancements to that programming. So regular surveying and things of that nature are really important to be provided to that body so that they can then make recommendations to this body. So kind of empowering that committee. I appreciate that that's not necessarily a smart goal, whereas I do think the capital improvements are something reasonably specific and that we can expect to, or we should be seeing the Neglia engineering designs and be getting some cost estimates and some specific timelines really within next couple of months as we are preparing for the next budget cycle. Because like I would like to see those things considered in capital improvements. With regard to community services, I would just identify continued improvements with the Montclair Health Department and our relationship there. I did appreciate that they came in with a presentation, but I think, you know, it needed a little bit of polish. So like if we can continue that and get programming through the health department as well as increased programming for seniors.
Mr. Diarco, we are due for a Board of Health meetings. As it goes Board of Health, we'll have to call that meeting. Go ahead.
This is a relatively small one, but this came up maybe during Councilwoman McGrath and I's discussions on community health, or maybe during zoning. We had talked about creating an inventory and map of all the recreation facilities in the community, mostly for new resident orientation. Just all of the hiking trails, all of the playgrounds, all of the parks, just, you know, independent recreation opportunities and passive recreation opportunities so that people know what's available nearby.
I'll talk later in community engagement about the new resident handbook, and that would be something we could certainly incorporate into that. Council.
Yes, I just want to add on to some things that have already been stated. When we talk about, you know, the different recreation assets and a plan for them, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about coming to some sort of decision on tennis and pickleball. I would think before the end of the year, just so we can decide what the plan will be. And then, of course, we have to see what it would cost to actually implement. On surveying, this is something that, you know, has been a big focus of mine in the last 4 years. Recreation is absolutely a customer-driven enterprise, and the fact that we don't do customer feedback surveys after every cycle of classes is still mind-boggling to me. It should be ingrained as part of our DNA. We got to the point where we do the pool survey every year. I think we do the recreation camps every year, but I really would like to see a goal where, and with the involvement of the Recreation Advisory Committee, that the administration is conducting regular and frequent surveying of all of our recreation programs and then incorporating that feedback into improving programming. But I think a lot of our discontent on some of our recreation programming is simply with the fact that we are not serving the people who actually take these classes. When we talk about community services, I want to raise that we should be preparing. This is a longer term goal, but we should be preparing for our new residents who are moving into affordable housing. And we need to think holistically as a community, including, you know, that interface with the Board of Ed on how we are going to fully welcome and integrate those residents into Verona life. And that may have implications for some of our policies and procedures, especially as it relates to the Children's Fund. But we need to think about how we're going to orient them. And I would like to see, as we learn the construction timeline, that it's not just about, and we've hired the right administrator to place them in those homes, but we want to make sure they really become Verona residents. And, you know, how are we going to approach that? And it's going to be a big one. So I think it's a unique opportunity. So I would like to, that's more, I guess, of a 2024-25 goal.
One more in that, right, this was one that might be measurable, and if I'm repeating something that Councilwoman Holland said, I would apologize. Something that you had brought up was impacted programs, the inability to accommodate people that want to participate in a program. You know, we had talked about finding the root causes of that. That might be something we can actually measure ourselves on, is, you know, minimizing instances where we turn away a desired participant in a program. So.
yeah, the waitlisting challenges.
Yes, right.
It has been really challenging there.
Right.
I do think that maybe what could be very measurable is to have the administration within the next 3 to 6 months, and I leave it to your discretion because I'm piling a lot of things in your next 3 to 6 months, is to actually have iterative steps, like kind of progress towards certain goals. Cause like I think some can be achieved in the near term and some is going to take some time to do. And I know that we have limited staff. We've recently lost a staff member in the rec department, but maybe that would be, maybe the administration could come back with a plan for certain things, like in terms of programming, surveying, addressing waitlisting concerns. Cause I know that you spoke to the Recreation Advisory Committee about that as well. I know they're very excited to help inform the administration. So maybe we could get a plan for how we're improving these things.
Deputy Mayor McElroy, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, and I know I'm gonna further what Councilman Hahn was just touching on is about our new hire. I think we have an ample amount of fields in the town. I know we talked about it, we have to redo Centennial. That's one. I think we should do an analysis of the fields and the scheduling on the fields. If we have them, let's use them. There's organizations out there, travel teams that will pay to use these fields, and we can have there's a revenue stream that we may not be tapping into. I think the scheduling on those fields, so hopefully a new hire would have some background in scheduling, and maybe better use of these fields would help out a little. And I want to just touch on, because we received an email, and I know it was just from one resident, and they may not have been involved, and there might have been a communication issue, but there should be something where we can get it out to the town. I mean, it goes for a lot of things that we do. The residents don't hear about it, but rec more importantly, because I know people are very busy, their schedules are filled up. But if we can communicate when programs are becoming available, so that we don't get into those arguments about, oh, I wanted to sign up, but I was too late. They're gonna fill up because there's a lot more children in this town that want to be that parents want their kids to be involved in these programs, so they're going to fill up right away.
Yeah.
So if we can communicate a little better there too, I think the rec area would be a really an area to focus on communication.
I agree with Councilman Holland's points on where we are with the capital component of this. Centennial is a well-used field, and there's something that I've learned at the League of Municipalities and speaking to vendors for turf is that the cost of actually removing the turf is so incredibly significant because you can just put it in the garbage, right? To even if you were to recycle the turf, you still have to pay half the fee to remove it. So it's still hundreds of thousands of dollars to take the whole field out. So when people are talking about how much a turf field costs to build, the public should be aware of how much the turf field costs to remove in order to build a new one. And because when we built these fields years ago, even when we built Freedom and Liberty, we looked at these from building brand new fields and not removing the old pieces. And that's a big piece of this. And I know that was behind, but Centennial was originally financed by a development. That was a developer financed field, I believe, right? Correct. That was the Hilltop development. So, it's one that we have put in some funding to maintain it, but in reality, that was something that the town did negotiate with the Hilltop developer. It's not without Debbie Maker.
I believe the cost, just a quick introduction here. I believe the cost to replace Centennial was $750,000.
And it's probably higher now because nothing in government costs less than $1 million anymore. That's not a quote for the public, but I mean, in the reality, we're talking 7 figures almost any major capital project because of not only the fees, but also the bonding fees and the engineering fees. And we're looking at materials and consultants, and everything is just getting more expensive. And it's something that we need to be acutely aware of is that, and we're talking now about the capital piece, something just to keep in mind. I had a conversation with Mr. Diarco a couple months ago, and one request that I made was that when we start to look at bonding for a significant amount of money, I would like to know what the projected impact on the debt service is going to be in the annual budget, because so often we talk about the bonding as a means of raising capital, which is what we do have to pay those bonds back, of course. And they all have a debt service component, which goes into our operating budget. And that's something that we need to start thinking not only in the millions that we're spending on various different things, but also in how is that going to impact the tax base? How is that going to impact what our operating budget can look like in certain departments? Because this has a component, and that's something, some economic analysis on every project would be extraordinarily helpful.
Yes, and that also ties back to the fees, right? And what Deputy Mayor just said. We need to look at some of these assets as revenue generators and how can we, and even the pool utility, and how can we really get things going so that helps to offset. Of course, it's never going to pay for the bond, but to help offset elements of that debt service. So that's where it all ties together.
And your a specific suggestion would be that a bond over any particular dollar threshold has to come with a reforecast of our debt service X many years out, and we should be maintaining a continuous forecast of our debt service obligations, just require an updated, those passages.
And yeah, and the way that can help us when we have debt that is falling off, right? That is a good time. When we start talking about strategic planning is we're going to need to talk about some of these projects where we can implement them once we have some debt falling off, and that would be super helpful as well. I think that's a very good way of articulating what conversation that Chief Marco and I had. And for the record, he was willing to do that, of course, because he is Mr. Diaco. And I'll do whatever we do. Yes.
One quick, to end the subject of field, but we should all know, I know when the Hilltop fields were presented, they're maintenance free. Our public work puts a lot of time and there's a lot of money that goes into these fields to maintain them. So the maintenance of them is very important.
And the other thing I think we need to also consider, and I may become unpopular by saying this, but is that we need to also look at whether turf is the right choice for some of our fields, because there are studies coming out that are demonstrating that there's a significant environmental impact from turf, that there is a significant medical impact from turf, and especially with orthopedic injuries and things like that. Right now we have 2 grass fields in Everett. I mean, Everett's a baseball diamond, but Everett and Veterans Field, which are only 2 grass facilities, is there a discussion, and then really obviously it takes more money to maintain those grass fields, but should we have a grass field? And that would be another thing that I would like to hear from. Certainly turf is very attractive, and but at the same point, even does the community want one grass field for a soccer field, lacrosse field, whatever it might be. I know the difficulty is you have to buy their specific expense, of course, buying different shoes and equipment, stuff like that. But when we do away games and things like that, we often have to buy 2 sets of equipment. So I'd like to hear more about that, because honestly, I haven't ever bought lacrosse cleats. I know public will find that hard to believe, but that isn't something that I have done. Okay, moving on to public works. I know we had talked about a lot of utility side. The public works, other than utility, the only item I had for this, Councilwoman Graff had brought up was having a road paving plan and reconstruction plan, which doesn't really cost us anything to do it. We can do that internally. And it also helps to memorialize a lot of the institutional knowledge that our expert staff in this area within the municipality have. Anybody else have anything for public works?
Just a long-term goal, and I didn't write this down before this meeting, but it just kind of came to me more of a 2025-28 is again, electrification of the fleet. And all the equipment. Gas blowers, gas leak blowers, blah, blah, blah. Like that all at some point needs to go likely electric or at least hybrid. But I don't see us having the time to address that in the next few months.
That is definitely not your
Yeah,
goal,
but that's where things are moving.
I have thought about this a little bit, and we've heard requests about, gas, gas powered equipment bans, things like that. And I always kind of said is before we would ever, even consider that, I'd want to see Public Works trying, I'd like to see them pilot at some point in time the use of some electric equipment and give us a real, like, is this realistic and workable? We're always going to need to maintain some gas powered equipment for use in emergencies. But it would be interesting if they were able to acquire a small amount of electric equipment and try and work it into the fleet and see whether or not it works on the scale that they work on or not.
I went to an impressive display of commercial electric equipment at the league. And I mean, they have electric garbage trucks, which were very attractive. I mean, for garbage trucks, but they had our Public Works level tools that were available. Once again, when we talk about the utility cost of, I think you need to examine the utility impacts of that as well, as far as what are we paying for PSE&G is fuel. That is something we need to
All engine maintenance.
Yeah, or, we cannot have as much on the maintenance side, but is putting gas in a lawnmower more cost effective than electricity? And that I think we need to find out more and more what the cost of the equipment is. But it's certainly something as far as studying it and looking into it is a very important objective. Because if we don't, we will not know. Council.
The only note that I had under Public Works that hasn't already been identified in other categories is for the administration to continue to drill down into some of the excess services that we provide maybe for free. That should maybe be subject to fees and somehow codified in ordinance, I know, or into a MOU or shared services agreement with either the Board of Ed or any other entity where we are doing work that isn't maybe necessarily being captured in free fees. And I also just made note of our garbage contracts. I think it's going to be longer range, but perhaps there are opportunities for savings in near term or longer term. But I understand those contracts are coming up soon, but those were two items that I wanted to flag. If it ends up being a longer term goal, I have very clearly identified the two top priorities that I have, so that was not among them. But I do want us to identify savings and revenue generation opportunities.
Councilman.
Yes, so then she triggered my thought process. We, I believe, previous administrators had put into place the hope that we would do a pilot on composting. But that's also like a 2025 to 28, like eventually we hope New Jersey will move more towards composting. It's a chicken and the egg problem. We've talked about it before in terms of there's no facilities to actually take our composting, but that's a longer term. And that's also hopefully a cost savings, in terms of garbage and recycling.
The mayor has worked that off on several occasions.
Yeah.
I didn't know what category to put it under. I was gonna hit with the end of this one, but I had I did a little bit of research and looking at what we spend on our garbage. I think last year was almost $2.2 million. And a lot of the composting goes into regular garbage and we're paying $90 a ton to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So I would think a company would be good. We tossed around, maybe we have 11 acres of land that can we take an acre and do a composting facility? I did talk to several people about it. Sometimes it's not worth it with the time you have to put into it, but maybe we provide the land, build a facility and have a company come in and run it. It would, and you calculate it out, I think we have 5,700 households in Verona. I mean, if everybody has a ton of garbage that they can take out of the stream in a year, it's over $500,000. So it's a substantial amount of money. I think if it could, if our cost to run it is 250, 300,000, we're still saving a couple.
I mean, we've saved money in our waste pickup from even simple things like tagging the recycling, which saved us pretty significant amounts of money as well. And I think people were responsive to that. So especially when if we talk about a cost savings measure, it just the piece on that is public education.
Yep.
And talking about how do you do that And I know that at one point we've gotten funding to provide everybody a blue recycling bin. Could we get funding to get grant funding for a composting bin? If everybody had one, that reduces one barrier of doing it. And, you know, if we could do this, I would certainly commit to doing it myself, because it didn't want to do our part because the garbage fees are just extraordinary. And for the public's knowledge, historically, we get one bid on garbage. And it's very hard to have a competitive process when there's one bid on garbage.
Everybody only gets one bid.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
With regard to composting, I do believe that we did have outreach about that, and so perhaps that's something that the administration can consider. And with regard to shared services, I seem to recall when we were speaking about one of the related contracts, so not our main contract, but there was a separate contract for vegetative waste that we were approving that cost as well. We did have a resident raise the West Orange facilities, and maybe there's an opportunity there for shared services. So even if the composting isn't something done here, perhaps there's something that can be arranged with West Orange. So I just wanted to flag that wasn't actually on my list, but it was prompted by this discussion.
Which is good. I appreciate it.
It's the final. It's been a very big thing. I read articles on it, and I don't know if you know that, but I think it was Queens in New York. The borough is now composting. We're expanding. I think Manhattan is by 2025. So if New York City can do it, and they actually have garbage trucks with two separate sides, composting for one side and regular garbage for the other. I mean, we even reading other articles on what you can do. We spend $500,000 on our recycling. You could shred cardboard and put there's your brown for your composting, so you can put that in there. We've looked into it in the past. I think we did the pilot program with Java Compost. So there are companies out there that may come and take it if we wanted to move forward on it, and I would be willing to put the time in to do some more research.
Excellent. Okay. Next on the list is public safety. I had a couple items all obviously the first is the public safety complex. Getting that bid out. Mr. DiArco, you kind of had a light timeline. I won't ask you to commit to it in public, but you do have a timeline for a bid in your mind. And it's I think it's a good, yeah, it's very good.
It's a pretty aggressive time.
It is. I think so I kind of had two dates in here, is putting the bid out for the public safety complex and then actually constructing public safety complex. I think we probably do that. On the other public safety side, we did have an incident at the Claridge houses that required a large response in July. As part of the process from learning from that, the emergency management team with representatives from the police, fire, EMS, the construction code office, the fire official, public works, the emergency planning council, basically the emergency management council without the school system because they weren't involved, did come up with an after action report, and there's some items on there that I think we should sort of look at investing in for sure. A lot of it is on-scene communication infrastructure, that interoperability. We found that when we have a lot of agencies, it's very difficult to communicate between all those agencies, and there are some deployable items and subscriptions that we can actually do that would merge those communication systems in real time. And my thought on that is perhaps we would work with some of our surrounding towns to have that be something that's deployable that we could share some that as a shared service, but have that deployable. We would host it in Verona and then deploy it to other towns in an emergency. So I think that's it. We identified some equipment needs and several procedural things as well that would be of help on that. And all the attorneys involved are reviewing that document. But I think that's something we could provide to the council as well, to get an idea of that, but, we tend to. One of the things is our emergency management budget has been basically the coordinator stipend for the last. As long as I've been in Verona, they really haven't had a budget, and there's some things that don't fall into one specific department that are multi-use departments. I think we need to start looking at that as subscriptions and things that we can put in a emergency management budget versus pulling from the police department when it's not solely a police item or pulling from the fire. It's not. That was probably the biggest thing we had from there. A lot of these solutions would give us capabilities in the future to mitigate future incidents, which is one of the major parts of the emergency management cycle. And that was my public safety piece, for those the building and the facility, and acting out on just the same way as the administration did the after action report on the resident communication and the water emergency with the emergency management office. We would want to act on those recommendations as well. Anybody else have anything for public safety? Yes.
I would just add, I look forward to reading that report when it's finalized. But for the administration, I would suspect that both the rescue squad, the fire department, and the police department have, 5-year capital plans. I don't think we've really reviewed those things in depth recently, and so it would be nice to review those capital plans, because while I appreciate, we had an incident and then there's some action items. I'm more curious on where policing is going and where the department sees future communication needs besides the new building. And what their needs are, because I know that we can't fund all of their needs, at one time.
On those items, all your departments getting 5-year capital plans. That was last year. They were handed those forms for a 5-year capital plan. You'll be seeing the same thing this year, probably a little more in depth, because they were getting acclimated to providing 5-year capital plans, and you'll have that during the budget process.
I think during this last budget process, we missed that step, so I think we need to kind of catch up in our understanding of what the.
Anything else for public safety? Yes.
One other, I know during the Claridge incident, I believe it was Essex County brought up a vehicle, a command vehicle. Being up there, I know I've seen I believe it was Public Works. Didn't we purchase some type of vehicle, or it was given to us
They got a
To-
vehicle donated.
to convert to a command vehicle? And my only thought was, it was a very hot day because I was out there in the sun for hours, not involved with the emergency part of it, but I did go up later on and I saw all the people, all the EMS workers and the firemen sitting out there. And I know I was told afterwards, if we had this vehicle, that it would have helped out. I don't know if it's something that, if we need for all of our incidents, or because Essex County brought theirs up, could we be involved in a shared service with another town to use this vehicle? I'm just throwing it out there because I keep seeing it. I think it's now up at the wastewater treatment parking garage up there at their parking lot.
Yeah.
I did have a meeting with all the chiefs. There isn't a consensus of opinion yet.
Okay.
Used by the chiefs.
Okay.
All three. Fire.
They didn't have a command. It's kind of, they brought a medical ambulance bus.
Okay.
We actually used the senior bus as our command post on a couple of occasions, but certainly there are other, in that, I believe we were sent a proposal for the other item that outlined its capabilities that we can look at.
And I know it could be used for like a cool down area for even the firemen.
I think the conversation I can share from our watch is a lot of the equipment that we are piecing together from multiple sources. And I didn't mention it specifically because it's in that part, but it would have been in one place had we had that equipment available. All of the equipment that we piecemeal, power, tables, chairs, air conditioning, tents, all that stuff would have been in one easily deployable place. But we, in this circumstance, had to rely on mutual aid agencies to provide those pieces in a piecemeal form, which was not convenient for sure. All right. Intergovernmental relations and shared services. Anybody have anything? I will start with, I think I have on this list, Mr. Diarco has been updating us on the fire prevention service shared services agreement. I would like to certainly not lose sight of that, but see it grow. So talk about revenue generation. The other thing that I know we had this conversation about, but I would like to keep this going is the township more aggressively pursuing to enter a shared services agreement with another municipality for 911 dispatch and call taking. We have the capability potentially to do that even in our existing facility, but obviously we don't want to spend all the money to retrofit the existing facility. But as we build a new dispatch center, we could build a new dispatch center to host that would be conducive to hosting these agencies while we're capitalizing that anyway. But I think that we should be aggressively pursuing that because it is a revenue generating service for sure. And especially with some surrounding towns that use police officers for the dispatchers, it's a huge cost savings to a dispatch based communication system.
I'd say that discussion would be very timely in the planning of, that facility. It would be nice to have a partner on board to justify building the appropriate facility.
Yes, I would say that's something, and then it gives that whatever town it is the opportunity to plan as we go that we could build this in. But that's something I think would be very helpful.
Yes. That's been a discussion.
Good. Any other intergovernmental relations shared services piece?
There's discussed that the West Essex manager group that we put together is growing, keep inviting more managers. And actively discussing programs and services that we could share and who would be best suited with to be the host. So those discussions are really ongoing. And will continue to be ongoing as the environment changes.
Yes. All right. Our next item is resident engagement. I didn't realize to start this one. I have a few items, but
I have one item.
go ahead, Councilman.
Restoring access to the historical council meeting documents and resolving any of Daniel's Law concerns. This is something that may require resources outside consulting or some other sort of administrative help, but it would be very nice to at least come up with a timeline of the plan to restore all of that.
That's an excellent point. If we have had those discussions, but I agree that that's going to take actually outside work to do that redaction, but and all of that. Which is what's that?
I can get it. We're close.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
You're a powerhouse.
Discussion.
Yeah. I added a couple. I had spoken about it before. I'll hit on that. I would like to see by next March a draft of revisions to our new resident handbook. I think this is something that we've had. It's a little outdated if we look at it. We have a public information officer now that can own this, and I think that's certainly a big advantage that we have. But part of that, I think, is also developing a plan to get it to new homeowners. I think one of the pieces of it, when we have a real estate transaction, we should be getting, we don't have to send, we can have an electronic handbook, but send the QR code in it or a link or something. And we can help from the municipal offices that deal with the new transactions and all that. But getting that out there to people that buy homes. I think the larger challenge is engaging our many renters. And this is something that I added as a separate goal. To develop plans to specifically communicate and engage renters, both in our large complexes, which is probably a little bit easier because because we also have a lot of standalone rental units. So even in Green Acres and Wedgewood Drive, which are condominium complexes, the owners of those condominiums do rent them out. So I think that we have some rental only areas like White Rock Road and lofts and so on. Lynn Drive only, and I think there are ways that we could get out when a new renter comes in that the document provided to them. I know that sometimes our code enforcement and fire officials or whatever go in when there's a changeover to do inspections. When renters change over, they could even leave a document there, like on the counter. That we could come up with some creative ways to do this.
Anytime we have a rent control unit turnover, we
can do it as well.
Yeah,
And that takes care of Lynn Drive. The other ones aren't as rent controlled, but I think it's very interesting. I had a conversation. I was officiating a wedding of 2 renters, and there's a conversation about kind of feeling of the community, right? So how do we facilitate that? And I think that's a significant piece as well to get into. And then I would like, as certainly as a goal, by next year at some point, that we have at least half of our residents signed up for rating system or Verona. So I think we need to put a number on it. And you're not going to get everybody, but certainly I think we need to quantify what a target goal is and build targets in as the years progress, and try and get more and more people. And it's something that we can very easily put in the new resident handbook, or drop another face off, like join our alert system, welcome to Verona, like join alert Verona, as we change that over. And I had spoken before about the nonprofit Township Board and Commission Recruitment Day. I think that's very important. I also think it's an opportunity to have conversational FaceTime with residents. We engage our residents well in a lot of our events and ceremonies and things like that, but there isn't it's more attending an event. We need to have more where we can engage and converse with our residents as well. Any other thoughts on the resident engagement?
I would say that when I bought my house here, I did actually receive a welcome letter. So that's something that has some past precedent to it.
Used to get the welcome wagon would show up, right, and get the baskets and the whole thing. It's a little
that's a ways back.
That is a ways back. But it's the thing. I remember when I bought a house, I didn't get anything, and that was 3 years ago. And I got a tax bill, which was very welcoming, of course.
Maybe we send something out with that.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly an option. Is when you get your first tax bill, Ms. Mascara can be like, welcome to Verona, here are your taxes, but here's all. But honestly, here's your taxes, but here's all you get for your taxes. I think that's another nice thing that we can put out there is here are all our trails. These are our recreation programs. These are our public services, and so on. That
It all really boils down to communication.
Correct. And then I think that's big. And we had a kind of a larger scale conversation on communication. I had that in one of my goals as well, that it's already in the works, but that we act on. I think it was in the public safety. Yeah, it was in the public safety piece that I forgot to read, but we need to act on the recommendations of the evaluation of the communication during the water incident as well. And that's something. Anybody else? So that brings us more to the communications piece. We spoke about the water incident and developing a policy and procedure for residents during emergency situations. Anybody else have anything? Go ahead.
I think on communications, we have to, and we can utilize one of our boards and committees for this, or experts, but just make sure our communications are inclusive of all residents, regardless of any limitations they may have. And I think down the line, because we've loaded a lot up on administration, I think we need a review of our website and its functionality and whether or not it should be refreshed. It doesn't get, I don't think it gets tremendous marks from the public on its navigability, but we've layered a lot on, so maybe that's a project really for a year from now.
It's kind of on my list sort of as well, just looking at it, we always have a knee-jerk reaction, put it on the website. Well, we never go back through, sort things out and, take things off the website. So I would agree that at some point in time, it's just worth a holistic review. I mean, I wouldn't knee-jerk reconstruct the thing, but it would be interesting to look at it just in terms of usability.
If we put links in a more common area on certain things, I find it things on the website that I'm looking for. And I think that's a certainly a piece of it as well. And I also think, just as an aside, it would be helpful for us to and for the public to understand what the scope and the job description of the PIO is going to be. As they're taking on more things that other staff members used to do, it would be helpful to have even on the website, going back to the website, but who does what? If you need X, Y, and Z, clean towns do this. If you need help with an event or renting a facility, this is who you call. And that would help. And who does what, certainly be a significant thing.
And just who does what.
Well, that's what it is. I mean, and that's good, as you hire and onboard a new deputy township manager, responsibilities will shift based on strengths and things like that. And that's something that is going to be more I think a public presentation. Obviously, the council should know what our staff are doing, but also for the public to be aware. And I think that lends to a conversation on what our staffing is and having a greater conversation on, do we need more staff? Are things my priorities for how we staff are we meeting public needs when they're coming in the building or reaching out to us? Because that's very important. And the second is, and I think they're probably co-priorities, is do we have the staff to enact what the township needs to do? We have a lot to do. We've had this conversation about building a bench, about having, and we are creating nothing on this list that we have developed this evening is superfluous, really, in any way. And what that leads into, but it's a significant list, and our next challenge will be to start deciding when these things are going to happen, and things that we might want in 6 months might have to be 18 months, depending on what it is, and we all have that. But I think part of that conversation is, how do we have the staff to do it? And even is there a possibility of having some even temporary project management staff that can deal with some of these things as well, while also, of course, balancing that with the financial impact of hiring us. We look forward to your recommendations on that, Mr. Diarco, because that is a super winnable conversation. And finally, the
I'm gonna bring that up at the end.
the
Major.
and that's it. And I think I'm just going to kind of add that in. I just added a finance category. Is our staffing. And our last one is economic development in the downtown. Deputy Mayor, do you want to kick this one off as our member of the
Sure. We got into earlier, we did actually touch on this quite a bit when we were talking about general code ordinances. But our downtown, when we look at it, what do we implement? We've talked about this in several meetings, even 3, 4, 5 years ago. Do we offer tax incentives to building owners to fix a building? If you have a property owner that doesn't want to do anything, then obviously our hands are tied. We talked about the one thing we can start in the next, we've talked in the past about signage. We have these rusty poles in the center of town that we can clean up, I said in the past, my company, I don't know if it's, I can, but sponsor a sign and have at no cost to the town, just get a sign made and put it up, and whatever company wants to sponsor it, and put their name right below, something that can be removed if they, pay for the sign plus money, and you're good for 3-4 years. So signage would be big, but there are way signs that can show where the public lots are, parking lot number 1, parking lot number 2. We talked about a vacant building tax. We're doing okay in the center of town. Buildings have sold and spaces getting occupied. There's very few vacant places now, which is a really good sign. There's a lot of new businesses. We have some ribbon cuttings coming up. I'm gonna email the council again. There's a couple more. But hopefully, that'll continue and buildings will stay. We won't have to implement a vacant building tax. And the other one I've noticed in the past year or two, parking meters. How do we go about, some of them are broke. I know which ones are broke. Sometimes when I'm hitting them, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna park here. I can save a quarter. But if we can go through, I know they're very expensive. So, yeah, they're very expensive. I love the idea of taking them out of one area and putting the good ones in another area. I noticed that in a couple spots. Excellent idea. And I think it was very helpful, but that's another one. There's revenue we're losing. And if people complain about parking, 25 cents for 40 minutes is the cheapest I've seen in any town
That's a good deal.
in Essex County.
Yeah.
So it's not that bad, but we gotta keep up on
Suggestion of me, convert a broken meter into a park mobile only spot.
it.
That's a good
There you go.
idea. If a meter is done and gone. And then I did have, I'll just jump in. My two are very, very brief. I also had the area in need of rehabilitation, short-term tax abatement. That's been a desire for a very long time. And then my other one was to maintain a retail space inventory and actually track our retail vacancy rate. I think that if we want metrics and if we think that you get what you measure, we would want to basically maintain our retail vacancies below the regional average or a comparable town's average or something like that. We just want to know how many storefronts do we have and how many are occupied at any given time.
I think that's a great point. I added having conversations, and I know this did come up. It's something that I have been looking to do for at least 2 years. Is to have more conversations with our banks and with religious institutions about sharing space. And especially downtown. That's big, and I know that we have the ability, if we meter the parking, especially to indemnify the property owners from issues. Main reason why our banks, when they don't use them at night, they don't want people parking their lots. Of course, it's wear and tear on the lot, but also if somebody falls in the parking lot, there's some legal liability for that. And we have a lot of very unattractive park here. We'll tell you signs for downtown. I would love to see an ordinance making those a little more attractive at some point, but I think if we can have some of these conversations, a lot of and not just for those institutions, but I've had conversations with business owners who are in an area where they're building up more business. But there isn't a lot of parking in those business areas. There are a lot of lots for businesses, especially with a lot of work from home within office areas that are underutilized parking lots. And our catering halls that don't really open during the day. Is there a way that we can come to some agreement, use our legal mind and our mind to come with some usage agreements where we can have those be public parking, and we meter them. I don't know if we can even split the revenue from the meters with some of these owners as an incentive, but to help pay for the maintenance of the lot or whatever. But that might help to break down some barriers, and even there could be a premium on those meters or whatever. Whatever we can do to incentivize that. Parking is one of the things that we hear about from residents all the time. And from our business owners all the time, because they want foot traffic. And parking is a walkable town, but it's a lot less walkable when you have children and you're carrying items, and it creates a lot of barriers when or if you want to stop in and do something and you can't stop at easily stop at one of our commercial areas because you can't find a spot. But I would love to certainly do more on that. Yes, sir, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some more sophisticated analyses and strategies as it comes to parking. And I think we've mentioned some great components, but it's really taking that holistic look at parking. And how we can modernize our parking structure, even things like. During the pandemic, we experimented with like 15-minute spots and stuff. We could make some of those ideas permanent. And there are companies that are out there that study just parking for downtowns and extended town center, perhaps as well. So I think that's, I think that's a part of the economic development. I would just also say that with whatever we do in this, we want to make sure that we kind of wrap the business community into and really getting their feedback to us. I mean, if we're talking about economic development too, could we have a roundtable with the business community to get their ideas like in early of next year, in the first quarter of next year, so that we can really have this be a two-way communication with the business community.
That's very important.
Just last comment, one of the reasons why I really want to push and get the zoning ordinance done is I think that would help in businesses, the ease of businesses moving in and out of vacant stores.
But it all plays out, and there's certain things that, and we did bring up parking when we talked to the planners. And I think there are some things that I don't necessarily want to wait until the zoning ordinance is done to enact. I mean, when there's some pretty easy, when we can just get parking in a parking lot, right? Let's do it. We also have to be careful, I think, of how many consultants we hire, and that's another thing we tend to talk about this, and I think it's valuable to get the insight. But I think one question we need to start answering is, do we have talent in-house to do some of this? And do we need to hire consultants for everything? Obviously, we don't have a professional planner. So we have to hire a planner. And there are certain things, but can we task with some coaching and some guidelines? Can the manager task our staff to do this? We have a lot of talent in our municipal staff, and I think so many of these staff want to do great things and have a lot of ideas themselves that they can incorporate. So something to. Does anybody else have anything that's not on the? We haven't discussed. So we have spoken for about 2 hours now without stopping. And I wanted just to make a couple comments, and then we'll talk about next. But I really appreciate all the council members providing very valuable insight. I think it's clear that while there are 5 of us with differing opinions and objectives, in many ways we're on the same page about what we need to do for the town. And I think that this session does provide that to us as the evidence. My suggestion is how we proceed is, let me type some more of this up, make SMART goals out of some of the ideas that people brought up. And then we don't have to do this all today. And I think after 2 hours, we get a little tired. But I think it's important that we need to take some time to review this. But if you give me a little while to type up some of these notes and start putting, based on some conversations, dates and priority stuff. And I think our next conversation is, we need to have a conversation of what do we do when? And some of this, I think all of it is important. So the question is, what do we do first? And what do we do next? And how do we balance that out? And we need to know more about the cost. But once we have that out, we can start getting some cost estimates. We have a lot of that available to us, and start quantifying some of this as well. Mr. Giarco has been taking copious notes and looking at this, but I think getting this all in one place would be helpful. What's that?
Page 4.
Page 404. I don't think I'll send you, and I think unfortunately because of Open Public Meetings Act and things like that, we can't use Google Docs. So I will keep this in a spreadsheet. I'll send it to the council with this start of the school year. I might need an extra week just to get this in. But I'll do as much as I can this week and send it out for people to review. And then we can either schedule another special meeting where we sort of talk about timeline, or we can build some lighter agendas on some regular meetings so that we can discuss this more new business. And I think it's really going to depend on Mr. DiArco and I are having more conversations about what do we schedule for which meetings to try and not have a very intense meetings, to try and balance more out. But I think it's going to depend on how many ordinances, how many resolutions we're going to have in September, whether we might need a little extra time. But even that might take us, it won't take us 2 hours necessarily to have that meeting if we needed to have a Zoom or something like that, or we could discuss that. Is everybody okay with proceeding in that direction? You know, yes, Council.
Yes, I think it's also really important as part to have the administration digest this and some of Mr. DiArco's direct reports. Because again, I think some of our objectives are very much in line with what they may have been moving toward, but some are new things. Because I think that it will come down to how can you ended on a great note on, do we have the staff to do this?
Yeah.
And I think that's the next layer of conversation, but I thought this was a very useful exercise to help us focus, and it is ambitious, but there's just so much that we want to get done in the next 2 years that this group is together.
Right. I saw the deputy mayor first.
I think once we get the list and we all digest it, I think, like you said, the next step will be the finance.
Yeah.
I think it would be important that maybe the CFO can join us for a meeting and go over some things. And this way, moving forward, we'll have a realistic idea of what she'll put a better idea, give us a better idea of what the timeline.
Yes, I think that's incredibly important. I think getting a financial picture of our current debt is big. We tend to talk about that a lot during budget season, but I think we need to, as I said before, have a conversation more regularly, and with an eye on moving forward. And what we do is we do have a lot of objectives, but we can place things in out years as we manage. Some of that out year conversation keeps these topics in our minds, but also allows us the opportunity to have other goals of the staffing piece and the resource management piece. And are there some things that we can put into place that can raise revenue to allow us to do some of the other projects? And that's another conversation we have. I think that it is my honest opinion that I don't think there was a better council than the one that we have before us to do this plan, and to really come up with this based on the strengths we have in the areas that we focus on, but also I think everybody at this table, including the staff, has a very solid understanding of our the scarcity of our resources, and the needs of the public, and a mission of really doing better for Verona. And yes.
I would just say that's just extraordinarily well put. I imagine the next department head meeting will be one for the books. But I do think it's very good to contextualize all this in terms of our organizational capability and ability to deliver. But I also look in the past and say, through affordable housing, through open space acquisition, dealing with the public safety facility issue, and at least acquiring land for it, we've proven that we are incredibly capable as a group and as a town here. So it's not a bad thing to dream big as long as we set realistic goals for ourselves and set a plan. I don't have a problem with pushing things into out years if we feel that they're not immediately achievable for resource constraint of any reason. But it's important that we do these sorts of exercises and actually set ourselves forward on this path. So I think this was a great session. Really appreciate everybody bringing all their ideas to the table, and have a lot of confidence that we will be able to deliver a lot of great things for Verona going forward.
Well, thanks everybody for your participation this evening. And at this point, is there any other new business before the council? Okay. At this point, I'm going to open the meeting for public comment. Madam Clerk, would you please read the participation statement?
Anyone from the public wishing to speak on any matter? If you're attending via Zoom, please raise your hand by pressing the raise hand button on your monitor. If you're dialing in by phone, press *9. If you're in person, please push the lectern. When you're recognized, clearly state only your name and township of residence for the record. You're not required to provide your street address. If you do, please note that these meetings will be posted on the township's YouTube channel. The addresses will not be redacted for any purpose. You'll have 4 minutes to address the council. After everyone wishing to speak has been heard, council may address your comments and your questions.
Madam Clerk,
So
Mr. Webb, you are. It's good to see you here in person.
Thank you very much and good evening.
You're at that one now. That microphone.
Yeah, make sure.
No.
Okay,
Turn it on, but
I'm gonna thanks you.
Your name and town.
Yes.
Correct.
Her led Verona. The council and this has been so long. It's. Golf, which I mean, you would do any. It's fascinating and it. You know, I know. I think Verona. Is wonderful. Some of these. Address. That's what, if you allow me to, I say. Safety. And we talked about Blue Jet. Now another one is, this is my neighborhood. Now, plastic. Full disclosure. Accident, you know. Not anyway. I mentioned just, we. The traffic and safety committee. September 12th, so that. It's only going to get worse. Because. Arch, but. What's going to be where the manor is? What's going where Essex, where, let's see, is. We get more crowded. For. Mishaps. And. Wait tonight. It's been worse. It's only getting worse. Okay. Measures. These problems. We're called Unter. But I see you. Organic. Doing. Services. This is what. West Essex Managers Group. This is the kind of thing I was thinking of. And I know Councilwoman McGrath talked about this maybe right after redistricting. And it was mine at that time. Necessarily help. It was. Very Morris. The very. Stay close to the mic. Sorry, we have a lot in common. And I think that it's something we should take advantage of. That there'll be more opportunities, regardless of party affiliation. There'll be more opportunities, more for us as communities and as leaders in those communities to get together with towns that are similar to that. Very much. It's a good holiday.
Is there any other public comment and we'll respond to the web? I did not see anybody at home. At this point, I'm going to close public comment. Mr. Lau, I agree with you 100% about the Mount Prospect issue. We've had a conversation. Oh, sorry, Mr. Ryan just came in. Does anybody object if I open public comment to allow Mayor Ryan to speak? All right, public comment is now reopened. Sorry, I didn't give you enough time.
It's in the same public comment statement. What is that?
The same public comment statement applies. Mr. Ryan, you have the mic.
Good evening, Kevin Ryan, Verona, New Jersey. Full disclosure, I sort of got into the meeting a little late, so if I'm
Kevin, I'm sorry, we're
repeating
having a
stuff,
difficult time.
okay.
Ryan, we're
You
having
have
a
a
difficult time hearing you.
How's
in the
that?
council chamber.
Any better?
You're very robotic on that side. Mr. Loy is gonna look at it and see. Give us 1 second. We'll reset your time. Try speaking again, Mr. Ryan.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Any better? Okay.
No,
Well, we can't hear him. That's not, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's gonna be something with the Zoom on his end. We can.
No, that's the same thing happened with the previous commenter. The same issue came up that we thought that happened before. It's that same kind of.
it's too. Yeah, I know.
We can just try dialing in by phone, maybe.
Yeah, Mr. Ryan, can you try calling into the meeting? Is that possible? It may,
Maybe you could respond to Mr. Left's comment in the interim or something.
yeah. So Ryan, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. I have to find the
Can you try
if you
calling
can,
meeting on the phone, if possible? That might give us another option.
Did Mark.
It's-
If not, if you want to even email
Yeah, let's see.
your statement and I could read it into the record at the next meeting. This goes back to our conversation before about needing an effective system.
Yeah, that I,
Band-Aids.
What's the number to call in?
The number is 312. 626. 6799. 312 626 6799. And then dial the meeting ID 952 6266 2770 952 6266 2770.
Madam Clerk, could you mute Mr. Ryan on the computer side? While Mr. Ryan is potentially calling into the meeting, I will respond to Mr. Love's comment. Just a little.
He just called my phone.
Yes, let's see. That's permitted? Okay, let's do that. Let's see. Is it? All right, Mr. Ryan, you're on speakerphone here.
Okay, well, you're on my speakerphone.
Okay, we can.
I am from New Jersey. Really, one of my comments is gonna be, hopefully you're gonna try to improve the Zoom communication system. If you discussed that earlier in the evening. Hope it came up.
Yes, it did.
Okay, the second thing, very quickly, all of the priorities you outlined were certainly not frivolous and necessary. I would just make a suggestion that you have a discussion as to how much you think it would be acceptable to raise the municipal tax rate in the course of a year. That would give you a better opportunity to prioritize some of the projects. And you at least have an economic number to work. And it might influence, when you can start the project. One of the criticisms that a prior council member had was that we were not raising the municipal tax rate too much from year to year. We have kept it very low for a number of years. And unfortunately, it is time to reevaluate the need to raise the municipal tax. It's great that you're looking to generate revenue, but you're never going to do anything on scale outside of the tax rate that is going to enable you to do any of these projects. And as far as Centennial Field is concerned, kudos to the public relations works department, because they kept that field going long beyond its expected lifespan. And I also encourage you, as I think Mayor Tamborello said, just flexibly go to church, look at grants possibilities. You know, do some type of cost benefit analysis. You might have more ongoing maintenance to grass, but the initial outlay, as you just pointed out, take a turf field down and keep it maintained is very staggering. You can also check with Public Works to see how many hours they put into maintaining Centennial Field. And the other thing I would ask you to do is consider moving the municipal election to November. I don't know if we came up with an exact amount of what a municipal election costs, but whatever it cost saving would be worth it. 25% of the people voted in May. I'm sure we can get the same 25% of the people to vote in November. I'm pathetic, but that's the way it's been for the last 15 years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Now that we extended Mr. Lyons, is there anybody else that has any public comments?
You call Jack's phone.
It's just, yeah, call the deputy mayor to pop into the meeting. All right,
You have the number?
at this point, I'm going to close public comment again. Let me take a minute to respond to Mr. Lev and Mr. Ryan. First, Mr. Lev, it's always good to see you here. I agree with you 100% on the Mount Prospect issue. Mr. Diarco actually had a pretty good meeting with the county engineer last week, and if we could add this to the agenda, I think that's a county road. It's something that we need to talk about, and I was thinking the exact same thing with the manor redevelopment specifically. I walk my dog across the street. I actually run my dog across even when I have the traffic light, because it is it certainly is a difficult area even coming down in, because cars don't stop. There's a very confusing 2-lane piece down there as well. It's a very weird intersection. Cars pass on the right. It definitely needs to be reconstructed in some meaningful way. Just as I have had conversations that I brought up before with our county liaison about inviting the county in for a town hall meeting where residents could share with the county traffic concerns, because a lot of this county at this point, the county is not interested in such a meeting. But I encourage residents to go speak to the freeholder board and to email the county executive for attention on these matters, and because they're also elected officials and they are representative officials as well. I agree with your point on what neighboring towns are doing. I've had some conversations with some elected officials in the area. And I think having a local mayor's league would be a great idea as well, that goes into line with the managers committee that's meeting. I agree with your comments on the 40th legislative district. We're not even represented by them yet, and they've already been very responsive. I was actually on the phone with Senator Crowder's chief of staff based on some items that came up at our last council meeting, and they are working and looking into some concerns that we brought up. And they are willing to do it. They have been visible. I look forward to building that relationship. And they're already willing to serve us, even though we're not in that district yet. To Mr. And I think having even actually using them to facilitate some of these local mayor meetings would be a very interesting idea. I think that was the point that Mr. Lev was trying to make, is use that common legislative district as well. To Mr. Ryan's point, I agree with you 100% about the Zoom. It is one of the things that I had on my list, and Councilman Roman was voluntold to lead this project. And I think using his expertise, we could develop a cost-effective solution that would provide not only increased communication in this facility, but also throughout the municipality. We take your comment on the tax rate. Well, I think that's part of the financial conversation we've been having overall, is looking at the impact on our debt service, but also our revenue and expenses on the operating side. And that is a greater conversation that we have. As we look forward, obviously, we do have constraints related to those items that are imposed by the state. And I appreciate your comments on Centennial Field as well, and I agree the Public Works department has done an extraordinary job maintaining a lot of our aging infrastructure. And the municipal elections moving to November, I think it's an interesting idea. But correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Aloya, you can't have nonpartisan elections on a November ballot. Correct?
Yeah, you can. I think we'd actually have to do it through a referendum, but I'd look into that if we could change the same way. It's probably a question for the.
There's very few places that have nonpartisan November elections.
Yes.
So I mean, that would be certainly an interesting idea to talk about what the town sees as far as that goes. And that's it. Does anybody else? Yeah.
I mean, since we're on the topic of, former Mayor Ryan raised it in terms of cost. So I guess my question for the municipal clerk is, how much did the May election cost? Is there a cost that's known, or is it still being worked out with the county?
50,000.
Excuse me, how much?
50,000,
50,000. And what in the past, what was it?
25,000.
So it doubled.
Yes, every department doubled. Printing of the ballots.
What does November typically cost? Or a primary? 0?
For the town,
Yeah.
a primary, we only have to pay the printing of the ballots, and then in the November election, there is no charge. Other than
Know if we would have to pay
that,
the ballots for nonpartisan.
I was actually just talking to the county clerk about that, the deputy county clerk about that this afternoon. And she's actually getting back to me because didn't believe that they do. It would be the other department, that's why she's not.
I think it's certainly an interesting conversation to have. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, could you come back to the council with whether or not we had the budget for $50,000 May election? I don't recall that being the budget for the elections. I'm sorry, what was that, Mr. Deere?
You didn't have it much.
Oh, so we have a budget shortfall there?
Yes,
So will you be coming back to address that with the council?
in November, we do budgetary transfers, but in the future budget, your 2024 budget, there will be a clerk's budget, and elections have to be in there so that she can function.
Is that timely for the county?
Well, if it goes on the ballot question, I'll leave that to the.
We can put this on the agenda, but it's a little bit beyond our special meeting,
Yeah.
and the public might want to hear the costs and whatnot, so.
I was just responding to Mr.
No, I completely
Ryan's
understand.
comments.
That's why I allowed for a second, and then.
Let's get some,
Let's throw it on the agenda for next time.
Yeah.
let's get all the information and put it on another meeting.
Great.
Anybody else would like to respond to our public comment? Are there any motions to come before the council?
Motion to close?
The deputy mayor has made the motion to adjourn. And the second is from Councilwoman McGrath. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting's adjourned at 9.